Well, hi there, folks. It's Henry here, and it's Wednesday, the 17th of August, 2022. I actually know what date it is today, but only because I checked. But for the last 7 days, I have no idea of what the date was. Maybe I knew kind of like how many days I had left, or maybe, you know, where I was in relation to times of the day. But so basically, for the last 7 days, I've been at Dr. Joe Dispenza's 7-day retreat event. So I thought I'd record this video and tell you a little bit about it, because I'm sure a lot of you are kind of like thinking or are going to ask me sooner or later, well, what was it like? Well, the short answer to that one that I've already been telling everybody is like, you'd have to be there. It was very experiential. I mean, you can find out what Dr. Joe Dispenza has to say in his kind of like lecture material just by looking up his various videos on YouTube that he's on, or he's a very popular podcast guest for a lot of well-known podcasters out there. So his videos are all over YouTube. Just look him up and you'll find out what he mostly has to say in his kind of like events. So this event was in London and it finished yesterday. So today is my first full day back at home, but I've been carrying on and doing meditations today as well, actually. So today is my day 8 of the course unofficially. So for those of you who don't know who Dr. Joe Dispenza is, I guess you could say um, he is the person who puts the science into meditation. He can explain how the science of meditation works in terms of quantum physics, anatomy and physiology, and the neuroscience, the brain part of it, how all of that actually works. And it's kind of like, so if like me, you're very analytical, of course, this kind of like explains, this kind of like really satisfies the kind of like the part of you who is kind of like analytical or very kind of like mind or and kind of like head orientated. Even though I've been in the alternative therapies field for the last 16, 17 years, everything to me is, it has to be pragmatic, it has to be practical, and it has to kind of somehow, work with the part of me who is kind of like still a bit kind of like analytical and kind of like, yeah, kind of like pragmatic. If anything is not pragmatic, then no. It's kind of like, that's how, that's how I work. And even when it comes down to intuition and that kind of stuff, I see kind of like intuition as a very pragmatic thing. And I developed my intuition through pragmatism, through the logic. First of all, I'll approach something and use kind of like the logic or the pragmatics of something as a launching pad. And then as I get more and more used to it, I veer off from the kind of the pragmatics or the methodology. And then I start to kind of like get my intuition or the arty part of me behind it. So that's how it works. But back to Dr. Joe's event in London. So this event was actually cancelled from 2 years previously. They tried to run it in towards the end of 2020 when they thought that the things were going to be opening up here in the UK. And then that was cancelled when things started shutting down again. So in 2021, they tried it again, and that was cancelled as well for similar reasons. Finally, here in 2022, it was able to go ahead. And this was actually Dr. Joe's largest 7-day event so far in all the history that he's been doing it. So he said at the end of his event how many events he's done, and I think it's 34 now, 34 over a period of, I don't know, 6-7 years or something like that he's been doing these live events so far now, in the format that they have been running in anyway. That's the 7-day event. He also does shorter workshops for like the intermediate level, kind of like, you know, if you've read his books or you haven't read his books, then, you know, the intermediate level events are 2.5 days, 2 days, 3 days, that kind of length. So actually, just before the 7-day event, which is an advanced event, although if you haven't read any of his books, or if you haven't seen his what I call the progressive or intensive workshops, which are the kind of like the base level workshops with containing all the information that you need, you can watch those videos or workshop. They have them. He's done recordings of those particular workshops, and they actually give you them complimentary when you register for the 7-day event. So you don't have to be, even though it's called an advanced workshop, you don't actually have to have done any of his previous workshops before, because they give you those videos complimentary for 30 days that you can watch online to hit the ground running, so that everybody's at the same level regardless of whether they've been to any of his workshops or not previously. So this was the largest event so far for a 7-day event. We had 2,500 people in the Excel Centre in East London. And just as a you thought, just as a kind of like a wow kind of like side note, just a few days before the London event, Dr. Joe actually was running a 2.5-day event in Basel in Switzerland, where he had 7,000 attendees at that event. A few days ago, I saw a photo of a shot kind of like from the audience, kind of like going towards the stage. Just this evening, I saw a video of the 7,000 people, and it is nuts. I'll post it on my timeline so that you can see it as well. It's just nuts. So I went to a 7-day event, Dr. Joe Dispenza event, 3 years ago in Cancun in Mexico. As with all of Dr. Joe's stuff, he is always evolving stuff. Things are always changing. He's always upgrading, and you know, and he's always researching and testing and refining stuff, you know, based on participant feedback, the kind of the feedback and observations from his staff who are at the event, the volunteers who also volunteer for the events as well, and research, scientific research, because all of this stuff always has been based on scientific research. But yeah, it's based on that. Actually, we also had 2 of the lead scientists who are doing the current research on some of the things that Dr. Joe's interested in, kind of like researching and finding more proof on for how his stuff works. He had the 2 researchers come in and give a presentation on their findings, and again, there's a blog article I can link to. I'll pop that probably in the comments as well, kind of like what they've been finding. So yeah, so from where I was going initially with that thought, which kind of sidetracked about the way that he's always refining and changing things up. He is always in the moment. So he leads meditations from the stage, and his meditations, which he leads from the stage, are never ever recorded. They're never ever pre-recorded. And even recordings, the numerous recordings that he's done of different meditations, they are there, the recordings are there for people to practice at home. But if he does the meditation at the event, it may have the same name, but the format could change quite significantly, because he's always adapting for You know, for the audience, it's in the moment. It's totally in the moment, and that also means that his scheduling for the entire event is totally in the moment. So having been to the event in Cancun 3 years ago, I knew that there was going to be a 4 a.m. start for one of the meditations called the pineal gland meditation, because 4 a.m., or at least between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., is the exact ideal time, or the maximum time that your body is producing melatonin, which is absolutely vital component in this meditation for stimulating the pineal gland and the chemicals which this gland can produce and stimulate it to produce, which is all part of the experience. Well, not only the experience, it can potentially trigger quite profound healings and self-healing in people who practice this meditation. So anyway, yeah, so 4 a.m. is why he gets everybody up at that particular time. So I knew that was going to happen at some point during the week, but he changed it this time. Whereas in Cancun, we did it. I think we did it 3 times. We did it at least twice, but I think I even remember that we did it 3 times. Now somebody's probably going to pop on the comments and tell me that we only did it twice, but okay, definitely twice, but possibly 3 times. But this time we only did it once, and it was much later on during the week. However, again, another change was that we, on the second day of the Cancun event, we started around about 9 o'clock, 9:30, which is kind of like not a surprise, because the first day is just an evening. It's just a few hours in the evening, so it's less than a half day really. So the second day, kind of like, yeah, 9 o'clock, 9:30 start, just to ease you into things. But the London event wasn't like that. We started on the second full day, or the second day, or the first full day at 6 a.m. Then the next day was also a 6 a.m. start. And then the day after that was the 4 a.m. start for the pineal gland meditation. And then we had a 5 o'clock start and another 5 o'clock start. I think that's 7 days. So, yeah, the week went incredibly well. Even though most of the information was not necessarily new information, there were new twists and things added on, refinements added on, latest research findings added on. So little nuances like that added on, and some of the meditations were new. I'd not done. They were premiered at this event, or some of them are not premiered, but at least, if you hadn't been to some of the other more recent events, would have been your first exposure to some of those meditations. So basically the events are a mixture of, lecture information to satisfy your analytical mind, and the meditations to actually experience the practical side of things. It's the practicum, if you like. So I remember one of the guest researchers who was the lead researchers who was on the stage was saying that this research is based on a 7-day event. And a 7-day event consists of 35 hours of meditation and 20 hours of research. And I'm not sure if I think it's more around about 30 hours of meditation. I think 25 to 30 hours of meditation. I think in our case it was, because it depends on, I guess, like the pineal gland meditation, depends how many times you do that. And so we start at 4 a.m. like I said before. So that particular meditation, because I've heard from other people, can run anywhere between 3 hours up to 5 hours. Our particular one actually ran for 4 hours and 15 minutes. So, but I tell you, it does not feel anything like 4 hours when you're actually doing it. So, amazing. So let me talk about my well, my experience, a really kind of like wow experience, a really kind of like, you could call it a mystical experience. It's not quite what the Dr. Joe community call a mystical experience, but it's pretty kind of like out there. So I will talk about it, yeah, because the whole week was going really, really well. I felt like I was probably doing better than I was in the previous event, because you know, things were kind of like the individual elements which I understood about the theoretical side. Um, I understood this time, but as I did before, but it was just that the individual pieces were clicking together, like a pieces of a jigsaw puzzle clicking much more coherently together than before. So yeah, so that's like I was getting the information, piecing it together in a much more coherent way than I had done previously. So this is everything was going well, and then like my my last day is the day where I really felt like, or at least the last day and the day before that, those 2 days where it felt like I was having breakthroughs. Not that I wasn't having any kind of like breakthroughs before, but it was like things. It seemed like to me like things were finally coming together, and I was starting to get kind of like some experiences which I had heard other people talking about, even though most importantly it's not, and it shouldn't be about comparing your own experiences to other people's experiences, but it's kind of tough not to do that. But yeah, and I do acknowledge that, and I kind of like I do bear that in mind as well. And also kind of like, just on a passing kind of like side note as well, I mean, I've always considered myself to be like at the back of the class in most kind of things, remedial, back of the class type of person when it comes to most things, whether it be academic or even in terms of like, personal development, spiritual development, all of that kind of stuff. Because I've not been the type of person who normally kind of like sees things when their eyes are shut. When my eyes are shut, it's black. And I guess a lot of people would say like, yeah, of course it's black for me as well. Whereas other people can see all sorts of like colors and pretty patterns. In some of the meditations in the last 2 days of the uh, class, I finally started to see colors and shapes when my eyes are closed. Not always, but they were definitely there, and I could say that they were definitely there. So what I was seeing, especially on one of the more vivid moments, was I was seeing red triangles which were kind of like overlapping and interlacing with each other in like geometric patterns, which is kind of like one of the things which you can see, not the triangles, but actually really complex geometric patterns, because another one of the kind of like famous meditations in the Dr. Joe community is something called the kaleidoscope meditation, where they play a video of a kaleidoscope on the big screens in front of the stage, and then Dr. Joe is leading a meditation and guiding and putting like suggestions and subliminal suggestions and things into your head, through his voice. And you put your blindfold on first of all, and then for a while he talks to you, and then you follow the instructions, and then you take the blindfold off and you stare into the kaleidoscope, which was playing on the big video screens, to go into a hypnotic state. And so it was after that, and without seeing, this was when I started seeing the triangle patterns. That was after the after doing the kaleidoscope meditation. So in other words, it wasn't during the kaleidoscope meditation at all, but that had somehow influenced as it can do. So to my mystical experience, which happened on the last day during our 5 a.m. start meditation, a meditation called the Body Electric. The title of it doesn't really have any relevance as to the whys and wherefores of my mystical experience, but let me tell you what happened. So I've been thinking to myself, because I was telling other people what had happened to me on the last day, the people who I was attending the course with, when we were comparing notes and what happened to us in the morning meditation on the last day. And yeah, it was quite a strange and unique experience, and an experience I've never had before. Yet it's very hard to put into words, yet I can put it into a set of coherent words. But what I'm about to explain is I'm only comparing and giving analogies and saying what something is like so that you can compare it. But I have to say it was quite out of this realm, shall we say. So during this particular body electric meditation, when we eventually got to the stage where we were lying down on the floor, because we were sat up first of all and doing some breathing, some breath, breathing, not quite like the Wim Hof breathing, but it's kind of the Dr. Joe style. And we also were doing some what do they call it? I think it's not pranic, but it's certainly quite a yang style of breathing, which we were carrying on even when we were lying down. So after we settled down and kind of got to the calm bit, and we were laying down, and we were just in the part of meditation where we were just given permission to float away and go away. So and that happens quite a lot in the meditations, where we're just kind of like asked to focus on nothing and kind of like experience our bodies disappearing, so that we become nothing and all of that. So to a certain degree, that was happening for me in the first few days of the retreat. But certainly in this particular meditation on the last day, finally got it to the stage where really my body and all the sensations were kind of like cutting off. The only thing I was really aware of was the sound, obviously, because I was still awake and I could still hear the sound coming through, but from the speakers and and the music and all of that. But yeah, otherwise I was losing all sensation, which I'm normally very aware of in my body, being the type of person that I am. That was like disappearing, and then it felt like the room was like slowly turning around and around in circles, and then the circles started like coming more like spirals and going into like different shapes, and my body was just following that and being rocked by that. And so I could feel this sensation coming on, and I knew at the same time that I had to just fall into it, because if I just kind of like started analyzing it, the sensation would most likely go away. So I got into that state where my body was disappearing and my eyes were closed, and all I was seeing was nothing at this stage. I wasn't getting any visual images. And then this emotion hit me all of a sudden, and all I can describe, or how I described it initially, is it felt like I was experiencing beauty, extreme beauty, or moving. I was moved by beauty. Yet, and this is it, and yet at the same time, unlike in a dream, even though I guess you could say this was a dream. Unlike in a dream, there were no visual images attached to this emotion, and it was hard to locate exactly where I was experiencing this in my body. Perhaps it was the heart. That's what I thought first of all, but it just seemed to be coming all around me and possibly into the heart. And the other thing, which is really strange and unique, was I could tell that there was no memory attached to, you know, this emotion. So you know how when you have an emotion, normally it's either attached to a memory that you already have, or otherwise it's attached to an event or something tangible in this like 3D, you know, this 3D realm. But there was nothing like that. So it was like an emotion without a memory attached. Does that make sense? And I've also heard some other words which also could describe, instead of using the word beauty, maybe reverence or awe. Those are kind of like alternative words I could use. And this emotion was so, it was building and building and building, and it became so overwhelming that I started to have tears in my eyes from this kind of like this awesome experience. But again, these were not tears of sadness, these were tears of joy. So, but can you imagine tears of joy from an overwhelming experience and emotion coming from all around you and inside you, but yet no memory or sensations attached which you could associate from this 3D realm, which could only really lead me to say that this was coming from beyond this realm. And I thought another way of saying this was it was like experiencing beauty or awe or reverence with a sixth sense. So not one of the five senses that you would normally use. So there we go. That was my awesome moment at the 7 days, which took 7 days to build up and get there, but it was certainly well worth it. And just so that just so that other people, I guess, would also kind of like ask. I mean, Dr. Joe and at his events, especially at his events, are the reason why they book out so quickly is because so many people know how high a percentage and how real the healings are, not just emotional healings, but physical healings, which actually happen there and then in the workshop during the 7 days. You know, I'm talking about things like people who come in a wheelchair at the beginning of the event and no longer need the wheelchair or the crutches by the end of those 7 days. So you can look up all the testimonials of different like health conditions which people have kind of like healed of on his YouTube channel. So just look up Dr. Joe Dispenza on the YouTube channel, or on YouTube rather. But you know, watching those experiences kind of like awesome. And of course, for anybody who's never watched any of those videos, they are kind of like jaw-dropping. That's one level. Going to an event and sitting at a dinner table or lunch table or whatever and speaking face to face with somebody who has had healings either at home before they got to the event or actually during the event, that's another level, because the person is real. They're talking to you. You can touch them, shake their hand, hug them, whatever. That is one. But I tell you, we also do group healings during the event as well. We did 3 of those sessions, and So what happens is that a certain number of people within the attendees get selected. I mean, people apply before going to the event if they want to be a healee or person to be healed, and then they're randomly chosen from the the number of people who applied originally. And then so once those healees are chosen, then the rest of us are actually the healers. And there's basically we're actually grouped into groups of eight people who actually will heal one person using what's called the coherence healing technique. So in one of the groups that I was working with, now because we're all working together, I can't really say who. It's a group effort, so there's no one person. But in this one particular session, we actually had, I witnessed a profound physical healing on somebody who had back surgery. They had a metal rod inserted in their lumbar spine, that's the lower end of the spine. And where they had that metal rod inserted, they had lost all sensation in that area. And also the movement was also restricted in their spine and their hips. Right immediately after that healing session, they regained the sensation which they had lost in their spine and in their back, and regained mobility and movement which they had lost as well. So that for me was like another level above talking to somebody who had already self-healed at home or healed in another group session, which I wasn't privy to at the time. So that is, yeah, it's such an honor, and yeah, it's an amazing experience. So I don't know how long I've blabbered on for now, but I just wanted to get this down on on videotape or MP4 file or whatever. So for posterity, and to share with you guys who have been asking or are going to ask. So yeah, I've had an awesome 7 days, and I'm ready for more. This is Henry signing off. Bye for now. Take care, guys.